This is Chris Ott, and I'm back with part 13 of this series on what Meher Baba really taught. In the previous section, part 12, I gave a summary of the previous 11 talks, the first 11 talks, and I went over 11 points that I had made. And I think that's going to form the general outline of this very short book I'm going to write at the end of this. And this series is not isn't in lieu of the book. It's for help to help me to clarify what's going to go in it and what's not. But now let me get on with what we're going to do now. I would say that summary was pretty exhaustive. That's enough for a very short book to go over those points. 11 points. I'm not going to re-review them. Sometimes I make that mistake. I go over what I went over in the previous video. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to go on and understanding that, okay, that those are the 11 points of the book. But here I need to get into some more hard concepts. And this is a part that will be harder to communicate, probably harder to understand. I'm a little less prepared for it, but that's the point of doing this, is that in doing so, I see what I need to prepare. By prepared, I mean have my quotes all ready to support what I say. Kind of have my bullet points laid out, how I'm going to cover everything. I don't have that. But I have the general ideas. Now, I don't know if this video goes on. This one, I might have to splice together a couple of videos because this camera turns off at 29 minutes. But I have a feeling this could go a little long. But we'll see. Okay, what I want to talk about, the first thing, is that when I was going over the list of points that I did in the previous video, part 12, I noticed that there's something in common to the misunderstandings. Most of the misunderstandings that people are a variation of on a theme. Okay, and I'm going to go over what that theme is, and I'm going to go pretty deep into it in one area. Okay, that that is the mistake of reifying something. Okay, I'm going to explain what reify means. Or you'll find the word reify in any dictionary, but it's not a word that people commonly use. But I don't know of a good synonym for it. To reify. First of all, it comes from the word real, to treat something like it's real that's not real. Now, by real, we're using this in the most ordinary sense, not in some philosophical sense. We mean a physical thing. That's a real thing. We're not being like quantum physicists or something. We mean like something I touch and see and it's solid. So an unreal thing would be like a fictitious island, like Treasure Island. And then a real island would be like England. Okay? But you could be writing about Treasure Island and you didn't know it was fiction, and so you started treating it in your writing like it's a real place, okay? A real physical place. That's what the word reify means. So let's say I think, evil is an abstraction. It's a word for all those things that are just terrible. But I can also reify evil. I can make it a kind of a force in itself, or a kind of a stuff, like something that you can palpably feel in a room. Now you can feel the presence of something terrible that's about to happen, and that can feel like you're in the presence of evil, but really, literally, you're not. You're feeling a threat. So that's an example of something that's often reified. Other things. I don't need to get, that's enough. You get it. Treating something, talking about Santa Claus, but you're treating it like he's real, All right. Now, in philosophy and in religion, and there are a lot of things that are abstractions, or they're symbolic, or they mean something other than a physical thing. So, for instance, when I say, let's say Buddhism has that all life is suffering. So what is suffering? Well, I could reify suffering, and then it's like treating it like it's a physical thing, but it's not. It's an experience. Okay, an experience is not a physical thing. A headache isn't a physical thing. I always say things like I can't put a headache in a shoebox. It's not a thing. It's an experience. Now, in Baba's teaching, um, just about everything he talks about, and this will really surprise people, but that's the whole point of this, is to go over those things that people don't know, not the ones that they already do. Everything comes down to consciousness, something about experiential realm. Okay, psychology, if you want. So everything is reducible to something, to some kind of experience. Now, what does the word reducible mean? We'll define it. There's a thing called reductive materialism. That's the idea that everything is reducible. Ultimately, it can be explained and described entirely in terms of something material, physical. So, a reductive materialist would say that thoughts are ultimately reducible to material states in the brain, physical states. That's what they really are, the most real. Now, I'm not a reductive materialist, but I'm sort of Baba is reductive. Baba is kind of the opposite. All the things that we think are reducible to physical things, they are actually reducible to psychological things. So the world that I said at the beginning is psychogenic. Genic means create, and psycho is the thought or experience. So everything is sort of psychosomatic. I said that at the beginning. That would be kind of roughly true. That gives you a sense. A person who has phantom limb disorder, well, no, that's not psychosomatic. I don't. Might be. Let's say it is. It's just like he has the experience of his limb, everything about it, but it's psychogenic. It's not really a physical limb ultimately. Now, Bob would say everything, even real physical limbs, are psychogenic. Okay, sorry that I had to do that, but I already qualified this talk that it's going to be harder to tell, harder to hear and understand, but that's why I'm doing this. And I'll probably do this again. Once I look at this, I can see, and I sit there and I watch it and I go, oh, I see how I could have said that easier. Okay. So I will give a quote in support of Baba, saying that everything is like this. This is God Speaks, Mayor Baba's main book, 1973 edition, which my book will link to a online download copy of it. Okay. It is this is Mayor Baba. It's from the introduction, but it's a quote from the introduction. It's from page XXXI from the introduction, or 31. Says, and the original source is the Awakener, gives it as a footnote, volume 8, number 4, 1962. Baba said, "It is well to remember always that the beginning is a beginning in consciousness. The evolution is an evolution of consciousness. The end, if there be an end, is an end in consciousness." Okay? So, the subtitle of Baba's book is The Theme and Purpose of Creation. And that theme is this evolution of consciousness. And that's also the purpose. The purpose of creation is for God to gain full consciousness. And Baba uses this in the full sense of the word. Generally, consciousness for Baba means awareness, but sometimes people define consciousness also to include self-awareness. And so ultimately, Baba uses the word full consciousness, which is human, as being fully self-aware. Whereas I a sunflower has some consciousness. It's aware of the direction of the sun and where to send its roots to find water, or it at least appears to be aware, but I would say it is, but on a very rudimentary level, and it's certainly not self-aware. So Baba has this evolution from um, he, no consciousness and to full consciousness, a fully aware and even self-aware person, experiencing the world and knowing that he is there experiencing the world, but not knowing his identity, which is really God. And that's Baba's big theme. It's God, the journey, psychological journey, from unconscious divinity to conscious divinity. So the creation is essentially a dream that God has, but it's an important dream. Baba even says that it's a significant dream because of its purpose, and its fruit of having this dream is like reality. So the name of the God Speaks, Baba's main book, is actually dedicated to the illusion that sustains reality. See, it's dedicated to that dream, that the end result of that dream is reality, the experience of reality. Okay, so people don't understand that Baba's always talking about an experience. Now this is what I'm going to get to, because by not understanding that, many things become inadvertently reified into some physical thing or physical-like thing. And the Theosophists, a group of people in the 1800s and early 20th century, they were very committed to this all the time. They thought things were real things, you know. Now, an example just that's in the world is, for instance, people think that heaven and hell, which Baba says there is a heaven and hell between lives, okay? But people think that they reify it as a place, you know? There really is a physical place, hell. And, you know, there's videos online on YouTube where, filmed in Mexico, where there's a crack in the earth, and they claim that they put a microphone to the crack and you can hear the screaming in hell, because they think it's a physical place. Or at least it makes a fun video. I'm not sure that the makers of that video believe that. I think it was a prank. And I'm talking faster in this video because I fear I had more than I can get through. But if I do another one of these, I might call it, you know, redo or something like that, because I think I'll keep this, because I'm covering some important stuff that is dull, but it has to be said. All right, so now let's get to some of these things that are reified because of this not understanding that Bob is talking about, a experience by God, that's what the world is. And that everything is, as I just described, it's all an evolution of consciousness. And if there were an end to it, an end to the world, it would really be an end in consciousness. Then the world would, it's sort of like God would like fall back asleep into his deep sleep state, and he'd be unconscious, and then the world would vanish. And there's actually a kind of well, I'm not going to get into that. There's a thing called Mahapralaya, which is actually that. Okay, let's see. All right, where we reify. Okay, now I listed, from going over the talks, I pulled out 7 things that are reified, and I'm going to go over them. One of them, which is really not reified from Baba's teaching, but is reified by philosophers, and it's a mistake, is to reify the theoretical external world. And I went over that with the Parisian cafe and so forth. So you can go back about the thing about the mind-body problem. The mind-body problem is created because no one could think of how to explain our experience except to invent something just like what we experience that we don't experience. That's creating it. That was a big mistake. And so they're reifying the cause. All right? And also they're making it a physical thing, which is very, very strange. So you'll never find it. And they've created their own mind-body problem. That's what I call the two world view. The real one that you don't experience and the one that you do. And Baba would say the one that you do is the only world that anybody will ever come upon, because the world is psychogenic. The world is experience. Now, the next thing that gets reified, and somebody downvoted the video of that where I discussed this, but then they removed the downvote in the on YouTube. But anyway, only I can see that because I'm the administrator. So I don't have to get embarrassed that people are downvoting me. But it's souls. So the soul is consciousness, is your consciousness. That's your soul. And it emerges out of the process. Because really, ultimately, there's only one soul. And that one soul, you can't say is consciousness, because that one soul is the infinite intelligence that existed even before there was consciousness, and that sought consciousness and had the capacity for consciousness. And it attains consciousness. And the little iota of consciousness that we call the individual attains God realization ultimately. But overall, this repeats over and over and over in each of us. Each one of us is that one soul. But you can talk about our individual souls. Now, I want to explain this a little, because that'll seem strange. Like, how can there be souls when you just said there's one soul? Well, it's because we're just talking about a piece. Consciousness has sort of demarcated itself off by its acquired sanskaras. And then even when you remove the sanskaras, that consciousness remains individual. Now, how that's possible, even Baba says, only God could understand. But it's over the level of the human mind. I can't know, but it does make an intuitive sense to me. It's kind of like you take a mold and you put water in it and you freeze it, and now it's a thing, and then you remove the mold and it's still there. It's kind of like that. So that the whole world is this factory of essentially a soul factory, and then these souls become realized, and then so God is forever experiencing this journey, okay, that he initially first had. Who knows when? Long before the so-called Big Bang theory 13 billion years ago. Who knows how many trillions of years? But this has been repeated ever since. And okay, so souls are not objects; they're not physical things, but we tend to reify them. So an example of that is the normal sense of reincarnation, where you're going around and in your body. This is an ancient idea, by the way. There is an object. There's some kind of a thing. It's not a solid thing necessarily. It could be sort of diaphanous and sort of vaporous. So let me give an example. I went over the source of a soul object being I forget what it was, but anyway, what I said before. But in my book, my second book, I talk about how the Greek origin of the soul, I talk about Thales. Thales had magnets, and he was playing with magnets, and he came up with the concept of psyche. But there's another source for the concept of the soul. This one's interesting. The Greeks loved war. They were always at war, as we all know, this ancient society. And they observed that they saw people die up close a lot. And unlike us, where we send soldiers to do this, it was kind of like it was in the society that people saw war up close. And, they had those statues, those reliefs in the Parthenon, and they were, I'm not sure if it's in the Parthenon, but you have soldiers, dying, in those. Maybe cut one of those in so you see what I'm talking about. But that was a major theme. So in death, when you observe death, what's the last thing that happens is the person exhales. And we even have the word, he expired at 2 o'clock p.m. Means death. So that means, and what happens when you expire? Breath leaves. Well, breath has got all kinds of things that interested the Greeks because maybe that's what life was. The life force left. And the breath is warm, and because it's warm, it rises. And they knew this about that heat rises. I mean, just have a you can make a fire and put like dust over it; it'll blow upward. So they knew this, and the breath also can move things. It moves the sails of ships and windmills, and so they knew that. So whereas Theus was thinking about magnets that push together and move each other, you could also talk about the breath. So the breath of life was formed, and in the Bible, sure enough, God breathes life into Adam, uh, blows it into him. So literally giving him a piece of his own soul, which is interesting. And Adam, suddenly wakes. And now, isn't it interesting? We do mouth to mouth resuscitation to revive somebody. So I once was talking to somebody online. It wasn't a philosopher; it was just a person. And I said, "What is life?" I thought I had a challenging question, and she said, "It's like life, like breathing." And it's really interesting. We really still associate breathing with life. Um, Plants, which we call alive, breathe. I think most things, rocks, which we don't call alive, don't breathe, at least as far as I know. But of the simplest bacteria, breathes. All right, so that was sort of the original soul. And now, when he exhaled, a soldier, when he dies, it rises, and that's the part that goes to heaven. So was the origin of that concept. However, sorry that took so long. I said I'm trying to cover everything. That the soul gets reified. The Greeks were. It started out as a kind of looking for something physical. Baba teaches that that's not really the way it is. That's all interesting, and breath is very important. And I don't know how to tie them together. It's important in Chinese medicine and so forth. But for Baba, the soul is conscious. Your consciousness. Now, my mother met Baba twice in 1964 and 1965, and when she met him, she was very reading spiritual books at the time, and she thinking about herself a lot. She's just that way, but in a good way. But she said, "Baba, what am I?" And he said, "Consciousness." And she said, "Where is my consciousness?" And she said, I mean, the way she told it to me, it's in Lord Maher, by the way, her bringing this up. She said, "Is it in my solar plexus? Is it in?" And she told me, she said, "Is it in my arm?" Like, I think to convey what she meant. And Baba didn't answer the question. It's very interesting that he didn't answer the question, because sometimes you're asking a meaningless question. Because I don't know why she didn't understand that consciousness isn't like that kind of thing. It's not a physical thing. It's a psychological thing. It's not. But anyway, Baba said time never existed at all. And there might have been a pause between them, and then he turned to her and said that. Um, I later realized, I think Baba was talking to me, because that is so philosophically important. Because time and space do not exist. And I talk about this in both of my books. And they're worth reading, and I think that they're important. They contribute to kind of getting an intuition of what Baba's talking about. How can time and space not exist? And therefore, your the consciousness can't really be in your arm, because that's something in space. All right. But he didn't say space. Didn't say space. He didn't think he wanted to give it away. It was like, this will be understood by your son one day. That's actually what I think. Call me crazy. It's one of the most profound things I ever heard that Baba told my mother. But there were other things. Maybe they'll come up in the long version of this series. Okay, so done. Souls are consciousness. Consciousness is not a thing. It's not located in space. You are aware of things in space through consciousness, with consciousness. Okay, so the next thing is God. God has, for a long time, been reified. Now, prophets have been telling people not to reify God throughout history. That's a lot of the theme of the Bible. You know, Moses said, "Do not create graven images." Muhammad said, "Don't even have any images at all." Their architecture is all wiped clean because you don't want to take the spiritual and think it, and do a picture of it and have picture it in your mind like it's a thing. God is formless. Form means shape, but you also have the form of music, which is the shape of the music, which is a sort of by extension another use of the word form. But he's formless. He doesn't have any shape. He has no attributes. He's attributeless. Now remember, in Baba there are 10 states of God, but they're all reducible to the first state of God. The first state of God, that God is the God that does this journey. So while a perfect master is a man who is God in the form of a man, it's not the form that's God. It's God taking the form of a man. So, so when we say the perfect master is God, you have to understand he's God realized. He has achieved his, because a dog is also God. It's God experiencing himself as a dog. It sounds outrageous, but this is Baba's teaching. It's all what he calls the advancing stream of life, as I've said. All right, so that's the third thing that's reified. The fourth thing I will have to get into no, I'll just keep going. I'm running out of time, so I'm going to reach out, stop this camera, and then immediately start it again and continue, because this is going to, as I said, be a little longer than the others. It's about this problem. All right. I will see you in a moment. All right. We're continuing on here. So now we've gone over 3, and now we're up to the 4th. Remember, I'm going over 7 things that we reify that cause these confusions that I've gone over in this series. And I said that these are all kind of reducible to this one error that people make. It's normal error. As I said, even philosophers make it. That's the cause of the mind-body problem. Okay, the next one is super important, and this will take me a little while. This is so important, it doesn't matter how long it takes me. I've got to get through this. It's about planes, or which are really states of consciousness. And I have to explain what a state is. But these planes, which are states of consciousness, are reified all the time. So Baba addressed this, and I have a fantastic place to send the reader to read where this comes up, and I'm going to read some of it. I have already, but I'm going to go read a little more. Okay, so first of all, when we say states of consciousness, by the way, Baba gives 10 states of God. All those are essentially states of consciousness, all right? But because the term states and consciousness is kind of hard for the mind to wrap its head around, I'm going to word it as I do in my own writing, which is ways of perceiving, okay? So if the first state of God is before consciousness is even conceivable, the state of perceiving, the way of perceiving, or the mode of perceiving is not perceiving at all. Okay, that's the mode. It's off. Okay, like the thermostat's turned off. But then the next one is God initiating the whim, having the whim, but the whim is the first sanskara. Okay, sanskaras. I'd have to have a whole section just on sanskaras, but the whole of Baba's theme is essentially perceiving and ways of perceiving. The perceiving, you could call that the rising consciousness, and the ways of perceiving are the sanskaras. And they're kind of like lenses, but you mustn't reify sanskaras. They are psychological. So past experience leaves impressions on the mind that color future experience. That's what we mean. That's the sense in which it leaves a lens that colors all future experience. And that's how the world forms, essentially. And that's what I talk about in both of my books. And I give a plausible and even logically necessary way that happened, order of events that had to have taken place for that to happen. And so Baba's whole explanation of the universe really only makes sense if you read my books, because I give a plausible theory for how that could happen. But try to do it without it. I don't know. Good luck. I never could. It was like when I realized, oh my God, this is what he's talking about. It was like, oh my God, it was so different. That's why I've been sort of outside the regular Baba community for so many years, because they're still guessing what the hell's he talking about? The world's an illusion. How could that be? The impressions create the world. All right. Now, so each state has its unique sanskaras that are building up and forming the world, and so it has a certain way of experiencing reality, or whatever, not reality. In a sense, you could say some state of experiencing the building illusion, which ultimately will lead it to unwrapping the onion and getting it, that it's really been itself producing what it's perceiving. That's where it reaches the goal. Now, I don't know if I said that well. That's why we're going through this. I'm looking for how to express this hard idea. Okay, so these now are states of consciousness. They're modes of perceiving, ways of perceiving. The whole universe is just perceiving, and but there are ways of perceiving, and that's what's evolving. Okay, so now let's get to this quote. Okay, now the person that is talking to Baba it's in the early 1930s, I believe, is Garrett Fort, and you can look him up. Garrett Garrett Fort was a screenwriter in the silent era, and he wrote the original Frankenstein. He was the screenwriter. He was very famous, in Hollywood, as a screenwriter, and he did other ones, Dracula and so forth. Dracula's Daughter, I think he wrote, and he was into the macabre. And he was very also into what was called mysticism or spirituality at the time, which was theosophical books, which Baba said the theosophists were way off base, but they had some spiritual development. They were reading in the 1800s. They had acquired recently translations of Buddhist texts mostly, and they were reading these, trying to understand them, but they reified things, and they made things up that to make sense to themselves, and they're not real. But okay, where did I put this quote? Oh, it's right here. Here it is. Yes. Okay. Now, there's this word. There was a movie. There was a book. There was a book called Lost Horizon. And I forget the author of Lost Horizon, and it's about people getting lost in the Himalayas, and they find a place called Shangri-La, and they made a movie about it, and it's also Lost Horizon, and it was in the 30s, and it's by Frank Capra, really famous director. and they just find the city, and nobody grows old there, you know. So it's based on a mythological concept in Buddhism that the Theosophists read. And remember, I said at the beginning of this that in the 30s, when Baba began his mission, Theosophy was all the rage. So it's even really behind that movie, which is a big blockbuster of its day in the 1930s, Lost Horizon by Frank Capra. But anyway, it's based on a concept called Shambhala, which is the, um, the masters go after they leave their body. And that's the way the Theosophists wrote it. So that's where the ascended masters are. I'm using air quotes on purpose because Baba says these. It's not a real concept. Okay, Baba says masters are in a physical body, and he explains where the state of consciousness that they go into when they drop their body. That's one of the biggest things in this whole series, is making this correction. All right, so Garrett Fort says to Baba, is there really the place known as Shambhala, the astral center where the masters dwell in disembodied form? Okay, beautifully asked. Baba says, he says, it is presumed that you already know that planes are not places. And as I've said earlier, I don't think that Garrett Fort was aware of that. But Baba was being diplomatic and really sweet. And there's other people around, and Garrett Fort has his pride. So he doesn't, say, oh my God, do you think it's a place? Because he literally said, is there really the place? So he's asking about Shangri-La. Shangri-La is a corruption of the word Shambhala, just so you know. And it's kind of a joke in China. There's a book called Lost in Shangri-La, and I recommend it highly. It's a very good book. It talks about these misunderstandings of Tibetan Buddhism. But anyway, Baba then says, the state and stage connoting Shambhala, really meaning the Shambhala connotes a state and stage. It exists. I mean, that's a real state of consciousness, okay? You see how important this is? You see how that got reified into a place in the Himalayas? There is difference of terminology only. This is also known as Vijnan. Now, Vijnan appears in Baba's own writing in his main book, and it's defined in God Speaks as the resting place of the masters. So it's Shambhala. The Vijnan is from from Hinduism, whereas Shambhala is from Tibetan Buddhism, or so I understand. So then that's enough for now. There's more here. I am definitely going to use this whole thing in my book, because Baba goes into other things that have been reified. Like Shambhala asks, are there 7 rays as told about in the occult books? And are there masters who function on these respective rays, such as Jesus, who stands on what is called the 6th ray of devotion? Or and Baba completely corrects him. No, he's very kind. He says, yes, these things really exist, but they're about states of consciousness. And then he describes the states of consciousness that these rays mean. Baba says that when we talk about, even it's right in here, when we hear that Jesus will return in the clouds, okay, when the second coming happens. Baba says all mystics know that clouds is a symbol of these states of consciousness, that God is in this state of consciousness, which is state 2 in God Speaks, and that he then has to come down through the 10 states into the human form. No, 7 states, the 7 planes. So he's experiencing the 7th plane, but to experience the gross plane and 7th plane at the same time, which is what an avatar is, he has to descend. And he describes the perfect masters pull him down. But there's no real pulling up, down. There's no heaven up there. All this is just symbolic language. Yeah, there's one where yeah, I can't. Yes, I can't read it all. It's kind of long. But Baba says these things are symbolism, what they're about. He's telling him what it's really about. No, you can believe Baba, or you can think that there's these places, and you can go on being a kind of a primitive thinker. But I think this is kind of a fantastic development, and why I think Baba is going to command the fascination of the philosophers and religious philosophers too, and people who eventually, not right now, they don't, because they come along and they're told that he taught a lot of the same old theosophy, and he didn't. Okay, they're talking about this right here. The source of this is a book called The Answer by Narshwan, and it is page 22, 28, 19. No, wait. Oh, yeah. The book is The Answer, page 26 to 28. But it's also in Treasures from the Meher Baba Journals by Elizabeth Patterson and Jane Haynes. Pages 195 to 197. That's where you can find this stuff, where Baba is clarifying the very thing I'm saying. Okay, so now I want to give an example where the other day I was trying to explain something to someone, a Baba follower, and he patted me on the leg and he walked away because it was just, you don't get it, Chris. We do, but they don't. And I was saying, you mentioned the planes, people on the planes. These are planes of consciousness, advanced souls. They're human, they're in physical bodies, and they're on the planes. Baba said that in Lord Meher, he says there are 8,400,000 people with subtle consciousness, which is the first four planes. And there are 8,400,000 souls at all times on the earth with mental consciousness. Okay. That's in Lord Meher. Anybody can look it up. It'll be in my book, the source. And this goes against an idea. For some reason, Baba lovers think that Baba said that there were 7,000 people on the planes. And no, there are 7,000 people in the hierarchy, the functioning hierarchy. But that's like those are selected souls that are on the planes that have function for the benefit of the world under the hierarchy that is led by the Kutubi Irshad, the perfect master, who's the head of the hierarchy. And when the avatar's on the earth, like Jesus, he is the head of the hierarchy. And so at that time, there's 7,001. This is all in Baba's book, God Speaks. But he's not telling you how many people there are on the planes. He's telling you how many people there are in the hierarchy. Like if I tell you there's 100 senators in the United States, I didn't say there's 100 people in the United States. There's a lot of people. Okay, so there are really about 17 million people on the planes, according to Baba. But this doesn't go. So he goes, but Baba said with subtle consciousness, with mental consciousness, but that's not the planes. Okay. That's the confusion. The idea that the planes are something other than the state of consciousness. When I say a person is on the first plane, I mean he has a certain mode of perception. He has a state of consciousness. He has sanskaras that are subtle sanskaras, Baba says, that give him a unique experience which we call the first plane. He has, and it's the sanskaras that produce this experience, that create the mode. That is the plane. There isn't also a thing. The people get these. There's none of this, But Bible people, God bless them, don't have. They're not. This is for the future. That's why I think Bob said the philosophers will come and the Bible lovers will all be dead in 16 years, including me, because people apparently aren't ready for this. You know, um, I'm going to stop, and I'm going to continue in a minute. But there's a little story I'd like to tell, and it's about how sometimes people who Christopher Hitchens and atheists that love to put down Christians and the God concept, they describe a reified God. Oh, you believe in a little man with a beard on on the cloud. Well, a lot of people do, including Baba followers, except it's the guy with the mustache on a cloud. And that Baba doesn't teach that. Now that he's died, he's in state 2 of the 10 states of God. Not state 2, state B, excuse me, state 2B. I'm sorry. Well, that is state 2. Well, the Jews, of course, ever since Moses, they don't have God in form. See, before they had little idols, and they were pretty primitive, little sticks of wood, rocks, little snowmen, and they worshipped those. And the the innovation of Judaism was that God was abstract. He was not. He was formless and infinite, and he's not to be imagined like this. Like God is way above these objects of the phenomena. And then when when Christianity formed, they of course adopted this from the Old Testament because the original Christians were Jews, and they kept the Old Testament because they saw it as containing prophecies of the coming of Christ and his mission. And so it was sort of like part of the justification of Christianity, the Old Testament. So it's very important. So they didn't reject the teachings of Moses. By golly, Jesus was supposed to be the fulfillment of the gospel of the Old Testament and bringing a new. So God continues to be abstract. You don't paint God. By the way, before the first 1,500 years of Christianity, you don't see any images of God. I'm going to get into how you do, because today we practically equate God with the painting in the Sistine Chapel. And I'm going to say how that happened. Because before the Sistine Chapel, there was none. How did this happen? What is that? You go to Italy. You go into the basilica, and you look up. Isn't that God? No, it's not. I'm going to say what that is. But anyway, about 500 years after Jesus, Muhammad came, and Muhammad also accepted and the original books. They called the Christians and the Jews the people of the book, the Old Testament, and he also talked about the prophets of Moses, and Jesus was a prophet for Muhammad, and he continued this line: God is abstract; it's not a physical thing. Don't make idols of him. But I've written this before, so I won't over-labor it. But in the 1400s, there was this conference where they tried to heal the schism between the East and Western Church, the Italian Church and the Greek Church, and they met in Florence. These were emissaries of the churches. And they met in Florence, and there in Florence, a guy came who was really fanatic about getting rid of Christianity and just going back to the Greek religion of Zeus. And so anyway, he got hold of Cosimo de' Medici, who was the Medici banker who was financing this is called the Council of Florence. And he was bankrolling this conference, and he said, we ought, he gave him a lot of reasons why they needed to go back to the pagan religion, just get rid of Christianity. And he was especially fond of Zeus, but other gods he believed in. And his name was George Gemistus, and he was also he named himself Platon, which was I think a Greek version of Plato, the name Plato. Anyway, I'm not positive of that, but anyway, so Platon conspired with him to create a secret college to work on this in secret. And about 50 years later, the Medicis went into the studio of their greatest artist in the Renaissance, and they said, "Who's your best student?" And they said, "This boy." And it was Michelangelo. And Michelangelo was taken home and raised in the house of the Medicis, where he became part of this secret plot. And you can look at all of it. It's very easy to look this up. There really was a secret college to do this. And so the Medicis bought he was raised with these sort of like adopted cousins. He was the adopted boy, and meanwhile he would be still being trained as painter and a sculptor. But when he was like 21, his cousins bought positions as cardinals in the Vatican, and they invited their little brother Michelangelo to Rome, and then he was given these commissions, and the very first commission that he did was a statue of Bacchus, and then he was doing these pagan statues all over town, getting money from these commissions, and then it was a Medici Pope that asked him to do the Sistine Chapel, and then he did the Sistine Chapel. And who's that on the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel? Zeus. Is not a picture of God, and you can see in Greek, and Michelangelo had seen depictions of Zeus. They existed in statuary, and that is Zeus. The beard, the toga, everything about it. So that's not God at all. But so this criticism that a lot of Christians do now reify but that was the tragic consequence. I mean, Christianity didn't really give up the ghost, and we went back to worshiping the Greek gods because of these statues. However, the idea was put into Christians' minds that God is this guy on a cloud, which was never an actual idea of Christian or Jewish thought or Muslim thought. And I just think, you look up God in Google, do images, and it'll be the guy on the Sistine Chapel. Because after that, they didn't do it. It's still not done. You have pictures of Jesus. Jesus was a man, even if he was God as a man, like the Avatar is. Okay, I just wanted to add that. That's a reification of God. So I will now continue with this list. Remember, I had seven things that are reified. That is the one that I just did was the fourth, was planes. Oh, let's see. I've got a couple minutes. I'm going to say this. There's a modern idea in physics. It's another reification of nothing, of dimensions as places, as some kind of cosmic something place. Some kind of reality, but they're not. The word dimension actually originally just means measurement, a measure. So if I ask the dimensions of a box, you get the width and the length and the height, and then those are its measurements. And that's how you describe its form in three-dimensional space. But because it has three dimensions, 1, 2, 3. If you do only 2, then it's just a flat surface. But you have to do 3. And so that's called 3 dimensions. And Baba only ever referred to 3 dimensions. You can do a search of under dimension, Lord Maher, or any of his books, and I can put all his books in one search because I have that on my computer. And he mentions three dimensions, the three dimensions. That's all there is. If you want to say a measure of time and add that, but that's not, because the first one is space geometry, and now you're adding, another dimension. It's really kind of dissolved. It all falls apart there. And that's where this idea of this fourth dimension was original, and you can look it up. It's originally from The Time Machine by H.G. Wells, which was written before Einstein got his idea, about the time that Einstein first started thinking about light and all that when he was 16 years old. This book, The Time Machine, came out in England. And it has this silly idea of this dimension that's like a space, a special kind of space that you move through. And anyway, so originally just measures were turned into places, and they were reified. So dimensions is a corruption of very simple, basic piece of fact about phenomena, mathematics, geometry, and then it gets reified. And that's why I have said that the new science is essentially a series of sort of archaic reifications of math. And yet Baba followers, they use the word dimensions a lot because they pick it up from the culture and they think that's a real thing. And they sort of try to get it in there to explain Baba, and there isn't that. These are all states of consciousness and not other dimensions. Okay, I'm done with that. I still have to cover three more. I'll do that in the next part, but I'm going to turn this off and continue. All right. See, I have this camera that I didn't know when I bought the camera. It only shoots 30 minutes. So I have to break these up. But I just stitch them together. So this is going to be about an hour and a half long. But it's important, and I don't want to make it 2 videos because people will never watch. Maybe they'll never, no one will ever see this. Doesn't matter. It's for me. It's for my book. I get to hear these ideas, and I kind of work on them while I listen, So I'm at work on improving them. Okay, so now we've covered the external world. We've reified. Souls are reified. God is reified. Planes are reified. Dimensions are reified. States of consciousness, which are planes. Planes of consciousness are states of consciousness, not places, not things. If you have subtle consciousness, that's the same as being on a subtle plane. Which one would be determined by the various details of your experience. Now, number 5 is something in Baba's teaching called the Om point. And this has been reified and to enormous damage to understanding of Baba's book. Okay, if you read Baba's book right pretty early on, I think there might even be a chapter just on the Om point. But boy, okay. It first appears in the chapter called The Evolution of Consciousness. And now Baba also uses the word creation point. I'm not sure in this book. Yeah, creation point is also used. It's the same thing. The universe, Baba said, the creation, sort of from the Om point, it appears and goes on expanding. Now, appears means it appears. Something appears to be like a cloud is really little pieces of water droplets in the air, suspended in the air, but from a distance it appears like a cloud. So when we say something appears, it means it's not it's something illusory that forms phenomenally. Similarly, like a rainbow appeared, and a rainbow appeared, but there's really no rainbow. It's the appearance of rainbow caused by the refraction of light through the moist air. I'm not a physicist, so I can't really be sure of how rainbows form, but you get the idea. Rainbows aren't physical things. There are physical things that create the impression of, okay, but that analogy doesn't work here. The thing is, there's a misunderstanding. I've heard it said in a talk by someone who didn't understand Baba. Somebody said, can you explain the Om point? What's the Om point? Raised their hand. Both had a PhD, the speaker and the guy who raised his hand. But he said, what's the Om point? And the guy says, it's a locus. No, it's not a locus. It's not a locus. This is so important. It's not a locus. Let me see if I can. All right. The Om point is not a place. It is the point of perception from which the illusion of places and all other illusory qualities falsely appear to arise. So there really isn't a point in space. It precedes space, so it's not in space. So it's not a location. Plus, for a point in space to be describable in geometry, there have to be at least 3 other points, because if there were just 2 other points and you had a point here and a point here and a point here, that would only define a plane. Okay, so you have to have a 4th point on a different plane to describe a location in space. Okay, and so it would be in relation. So if you had a point here, and a point here, and a point here, and a point here, you could now say so much distance from this point, and you could triangulate and sort of on a graph show where in space that point is. So the idea that the Om point, which is the creation point, is a point in space means is just so unbelievably primitive. It's awful. It's just doesn't know anything about geometry. To even use the word point in that literal sense. It's a point of view. It's a point of perspective. What's your point of perspective? From what, what's your point of view on this topic? See, again, it's about consciousness. It's your state of consciousness. Okay, but this is God's original state of consciousness, which is point. Actually, it's state 2 of the 10 states of God, where the Om point apparently happens. It's not a thing. It's not a phenomenon. It's the point from which phenomena appears and goes on expanding. So it's a vantage point. That's what it is. And this understanding completely turns everything inside out. And suddenly it starts to actually make sense. And everything I've said so far, that the world is a psychosomatic, psychogenic result of the evolution of these sanskaras and how they affect consciousness, that produces the world. All right, and that's the sense in which these guys having this discussion. Sir, what is the Om point? What is a locus? They're reifying the Om point. So that's why I brought this up. It's one of these reified things. And why they think the world really formed. Because they think that was a point in space. And so then naturally they equate it with the point in the new physics about in the beginning there was nothing and then it exploded. The point in space where that exploded. It's very, it's kind of like picturing like these things before the world, but in a world like this one. It's kind of, so again, you kind of have this 2 world view, the world in which the world formed. because that's all they can picture. It's like inductively, like things that they have experienced phenomenally, they project onto their causes, their imagined causes. They imagine the cause like the things it causes. This is a theme in my second book. A really important theme. Imagining the causes of phenomena like the phenomena it causes. Okay, so that's that. That's the own point. And then a very important another thing that's reified is Baba, who, after his death, or any master, perfect master, or Jesus, or Buddha, when Buddha died, his disciples didn't lay across his grave and try to communicate with him on the other side, nor did that's so repulsive. They went around and they tried to live the Eightfold Path as traveling itinerant monks until Ashoka converted to Buddhism and he created all the temples, and like 200 years later. There was no necromancy with Buddha. That wasn't the point of Buddhism, to have a personal relationship with Buddha. That's a very 19th century invention. There's a lot of writing on it. Look up personal savior in Google, and you'll see it's a big topic right now because it's not biblical. It's very recent. So it's not just the Baba lovers reifying everything. It's kind of a trend. Baba, when he's alive, he is in state 10, which is the same as 2C. And then when he drops his body, he says, when I drop my body, when a master drops his body, he goes into state 2B. He doesn't say after 100 years he goes into state 2B. That's not Baba's teaching, but that's the teaching of the Baba followers who need to have this sort of necrophantic fantasy of Baba. And, I've read the quote. I've read it many times. It's from The Glow, a magazine on Baba for many, many decades. And it's summer 2012, page 8. Mayor Baba said, when a master dies, he takes no further interest in the affairs of the gross world, nor even of Christ. Hence, those who imagine that a dead master is responding to their prayers or watching them are wrong. He goes on to say if they have a vision of him, it could be a perfect master appearing as that avatar, or other master that you've been praying to, say, and for your good. But the actual master is in Shambhala, okay, which is a state of consciousness, and that state is 2B. And I could say more about that state, but it's enough. And in that state, there's experience of reality and not of illusion. And this is something else I need to talk about eventually. It's like why the Bob lovers can't get their mind around the fact that this world is nothing. And so they want Baba to experience it too with them. It's so sad. Baba wants a break from illusion. They think the illusion is very real. All the things they deal with. It's just, they never really got the memo of his life. And I'm trying to bring that memo to future philosophers. I'm sorry this is kind of a messy video, but I'm in my third part. I've been actually sitting here a pretty long time, and I'm getting a little tired. But I'm going to keep this anyway. Okay, now did I do... Oh, I already just did it. The illusory universe that gets reified. There is no universe. Baba didn't create a universe. And that's why the Berkeley talk in part 11 is really useful, because Berkeley recognized that. If God could create the idea, the phenomena of the world, why would he also create a world in some physical sense, which we can't even define, because it's only theoretical, and what we're even talking about is unclear, because the only world that we experience is the world we experience. So he said, well, maybe the world we experience is the world. That's Barclay. That was the first one to ever think of that. And he doesn't get enough credit for it. So that was um, part 11. Barclay's idea that the world was really just ideas in the mind of God. And that's Baba's teaching too. It's really in simple terms. I don't like the idea that God has a mind, but because mind, that's just a word for to help us. We imagine we have minds. I don't believe in minds. That would be a reification also, reifying your thoughts into some kind of a basket that holds them. It's not necessary. Okay, so that's number 7. The illusory universe gets reified. Baba, as I've said a couple of times in this series, he said, "Who says God created the world? We created it in our imagination." See, yeah. Okay, that's it. I don't, I don't think I got any awards for this talk, but I got my points across. I said them, and it'll be in the book. And as I said at the beginning, if I need to, I knew this was going to be tough. If I need to, I'll do this again. But that's not generally my way. I let things lay, and then it helps me later when I do talk about it at another time or write it. But there's no point in just redoing it. I got my points across. The 7 things that we reify that are the culprit behind a lot of these 11 misunderstandings of Baba's teaching. Jay Baba, thank you for watching, and I guess the next one will be part 14. Yeah. Okay, take care. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.